Hey everyone, today I'm going to be talking about how I set up structured data markups in my Next.js website. Now, this video goes along with a blog post where all the information and links that I'm talking about are listed right here. So if you prefer reading over listening or you're tired of my lousy accent, then make sure to check it out through the link in the description. Now, before I go on to show you my code, let's first look at what we are trying to achieve and what the end result should look like. So here is my website, whisker.com, and it's a platform for interviewing experts and brands. And by the way, the code for whisker.com is in the public repo. So if you want to have a look at it and also ask me questions regarding it, so you can do so through the discussion section right here. All right, this is an example of a profile page on whisker.com. It's pretty simple as you can see, but if I go over to the browser console and I search for schema.org, you can see what I have set up here. In the main section of my HTML, there's a script. And inside that script, there's an object with the schema.org key and values. You can see here that the type is set to profile page, which is exactly the structured data type that we want for a profile page. Now, another way to check what structured data a page has is with an SEO extension. All you have to do is click on the extension, click structured, and you can immediately see that in our case, the page is a profile page. Now, if you click on read more, you can view the entire schema.org object that we defined. Okay, so now that we have it set up on the browser, we also need to make sure that Google can properly read our script and that it recognizes the page as a profile page type. So how do we do that? We copy the URL of the page and we go over to this Google tool for checking structured data. I paste the URL and click enter. Now, this might take a minute or two, and here we have it, one valid item detected, and that valid item is a profile page. So this is great. This is my end goal with structured data markups. Now, let's go over and look at the Next.js documentation. All right, so here's the documentation for Next.js structured data markups. In the sidebar menu, it's under optimizing, under metadata, and under the title JSON LD. Now, you may be asking what is JSON LD and what it has to do with data markups. So JSON LD is a format for structured data that can be understood by search engines to classify content types. There are other formats like microdata and RDF, but in Next.js we use JSON LD, which is also the most common one. Now, let's look at this example given by Next.js for a product page structured data. This example has two parts. The first part is defining the JSON LD object with 5 key value pairs. First is the context, which is always set to schema.org. Then the type, which is set to product in this case, the name of the product, the image of the product, and the description of the product. The second part is the script under the return statement, and the goal of this script is to insert the JSON LD object into the main section of our HTML. The script that you're seeing here in the example remains the same, and what changes is only the type of the JSON LD object. And if you're not sure what data structure you should use for your JSON LD object, you can go on this website by Google and search for the right structure data markups for your page. In my case, for Whisker's profile page that I showed you earlier, I used the obvious profile page structure data you can see here. For each markup, you can see exactly in which scenarios this is the right structure data to use and in which it isn't. In the second example by Next.js, if you're building with TypeScript, and I really hope you do, it is recommended to use the DTS extension to safe type your JSON LD object. It takes 2 seconds to install and it makes your life much easier, so if you're using TypeScript, make sure to do it. Okay, now let's go over and look at my specific example for the profile page on whisker.com. By the way, if you want to open this code on your browser, I added a link for it inside the blog post. So just like the example from the documentation, my code for the structured data is also separated into two parts. In the first part, I declare the JSON LD object and specify the relevant properties for it. And in the second part, I call the script to insert the code to my HTML, right under the return statement. As I said earlier, the script part stays the same in all of my pages, and at least until now, I didn't have any reason to change it. One thing you might have noticed is that here it says dangerously insert HTML. Now, I'm not going to get into why it's called that way, but I will say that you probably shouldn't be too worried about it, as this is an example from the official documentation of Next.js. But you definitely should know what it means, and there's a link for an explanation inside of the blog post. Let's go back to look at the JSON LD object. What you're seeing here is the type definition that's coming from the schema DTS extension I have installed. This will type correct me in cases where I try to define a wrong key or value that doesn't go with the structured data I set up. In the next line, we define context, which is always the URL of schema.org, so this one never changes. Then we have the type, which is naturally the same as the TypeScript type. Right after that, we start to define the data for the specific instance under another object called main entity. This is pretty straightforward, but let's go over it quickly. First, I define the type of the user, which in my case is a person, but in other cases it might be an avatar or maybe a pet or a robot, for example. Then, I define the name and the job title. On Whisker, it made sense to define the job title as an array of badges the user acquired, so this is an array of badges that was scripted into a sentence. It ends up looking something like this. Then I define the image, the page URL, and the awards, which is similar to job title in my case. I could have defined more properties as you can see here, but this is enough for me at the moment. Now let's look at another example. Here we are looking at the code of Whisker.com question page, which is a question followed by many answers. For this kind of page, the suitable structured data is a Q&A markup. And once again, I have the same two parts that assemble the structured data. I have the JSON LD object right here, and the script under the return statement that looks just the same as before here. Looking at the JSON LD object, you can see that it looks similar to the profile page, but obviously has different properties. The type is now set to Q&A page, and in the main entity, I have one question followed by an array of suggested answers. Let's see how it looks like on the browser. First of all, we can see that it's properly set up and working, and if we click on read more, we can see the question followed by many answers. Now, just like we did with the profile page, let's make sure that Google can properly read our structured data. So let's copy the URL and open the Google tool for checking structured data. Paste the URL and click test. And there you have it, one valid item detected. And that valid item is a Q&A page. But wait a minute, as you can see, I have one valid item detected, but I also have a non-critical issue detected. Let's see what it is. Okay, so it says I'm missing both the date published for the question and the upvote count for each of the 8 answers on this question page. Now, I don't have upvote count on Whisker yet, and that's optional, so that's fine for me now. But I'm definitely going to look into the issue with date published right after finishing this video. Now, the last thing I want to show you is that there's another way to check your structured data, and it's by going to schema.org website. Just like with the Google tool, you insert your URL and click Run Test. Wait a minute or two, and here I get a Q&A page for my URL with 0 warnings, which is great. Alright, this is it for this video. As I said earlier, you can view the entire code of my project, Whisker.com, on the public repo. And if you have any questions about it, or any comments, or any improvements, please let me know by going on the discussions under the discussions tab, and I will be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you for watching.